Let's get started. Hi, welcome everyone. Welcome to Intentional Marriages Weekly Webinar. My name is Danielle West, and this is my husband.
Hi, this is Russ. Hello, everyone.
And thank you so much for joining us. We have put together quite a collection of negative thinking patterns to go over with you. So we are looking forward to jumping into this. But before we get started, I'm going to kind of keep my notes right here in front of me instead of all the way over to the right there. We're going to go ahead and just recap what we've been doing this past month.
Yeah, so this month we've been talking about negative thinking patterns. First, we did 2 a week. The first 2 weeks we did personalizing and magnifying. And then the second week we did emotional reasoning and overgeneralizing. And then last week we did polarizing and minimizing. So today we'll go through, we'll recap the 6th a little more in detail. And I hope you've enjoyed the last 3 weeks.
And if you missed the last 3 weeks, you can definitely go see the replays on them. But before we jump in, I wanted to share an offer with you. You know how these free webinars always tend to hold you hostage, and at the very end, they give you the offer? Well, we're going to share it up front. So in case you need to jump off, I wanted to give you the details of it right now. This offer is for our weekly webinars. And the title is Lessen Your Frustration and Get Back to Flirtation. Don't we all want that in our marriage? Is somehow to argue less with our spouse? These weekly webinars are usually no more than 5 to 10 minutes long. And the summertime special we have right now is $10 a month. As of June 30th, we'll be closing the doors and opening them back up in January when the price will go to $18 a month. Really good price to jump in on now, and you can cancel anytime. If you have any questions that come up at the very end, we're going to be going over Q&A. So right here in the chat room, be sure to leave us some questions.
Great. And also the test that you can take about negative thinking patterns is in the book Intimate Encounters, written by David and Teresa Ferguson. It's a fantastic book. We were first introduced to this book back in 2004. When we were engaged, and went through the book, and it was just, it helped us so much. There's many other great things in the book besides the negative thinking patterns test and everything about each of the 6. So if you're interested in taking the test, buy the book. It is definitely worth it. Once again, it's Intimate Encounters by David and Teresa Ferguson.
And as Russ mentioned, the 6 common unhealthy thinking patterns are personalizing. Hello, hi, I'm personalizer. Magnifier, overgeneralizing, emotional reasoning, polarizing, and minimizing. Let me start off with personalizing. Personalizers have a tendency to take external events as a personal rejection. We tend to read into other people's quirks or movements. Like, for example, if somebody rolls their eyes or does a deep sigh, I'm thinking, they're just bored with my story. They can't wait to get out of here. And I tend to read into that as something that's my fault, as opposed to maybe they had a long day at work. And this would drive Russ crazy because I was so determined that I knew exactly what that expression that person had or why they walked away from the conversation when they did. And usually personalizers come from a highly critical home, or they were rejected in childhood. We have a tendency to think everything's my fault. I can't do anything right. And one of the biggest things, and this one takes a lot of work, is to take every thought captive. And then Philippians 4:8 says, concentrate on what is true. That's what I have to do about these personalizing events when they do happen, is to take that thought captive and think about what's true in the moment instead of the story that I make up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So while Danielle is the personalizer, I'm the magnifier. And the magnifier is your typical overreactor. You probably know someone like that just overreacts to every situation, thinks that everything is so traumatic that it's a disaster. They use words like horrible, terrible, worse, disaster. And so that's, makes mountains out of molehills, makes little things big, big things bigger. And that's something that I've always struggled with. Typical person that might come from a traumatic childhood. or a child who had to take responsibility really early on in childhood, over responsibility. But when you put a magnifier like me together with a personalizer like Danielle, whew, it's tough. So we were fortunate that we learned this early on, what was happening. It took, as Danielle said, it took us a lot of effort and years to get good at managing that process. So when I would overreact, Danielle would not take it personally. And so when she would personalize, I would kind of understand where she was coming from. And you start once you understand why your spouse has one of these negative thinking patterns, you'll start having a lot more compassion for them. It'll still irritate you, obviously, but you'll have compassion knowing that where it comes from. It's not like something they're just choosing to do and it's easy for them to change. These are the way we're wired, and it's very hard to change. It takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of managing with each other, and takes a lot of compassion and forgiveness.
Now, we've mentioned a couple times that it's taken us years to work through, but we're going to give you some shortcuts tonight that I think can really help you argue less and be less frustrated with each other.
Yeah, so for me, with magnifying or overreacting, when I get usually it's because I get angry or get frustrated. And so what I'll learn to do is, I know now that whenever I get really angry or really frustrated about something, then it's more about what's inside me than what's going on around me. So I'll start asking to Danielle's point about taking the thought captive. I'll start just asking myself, okay, why am I so angry? Why is that so frustrating? And if I ask myself the why questions, it always will come back to it's bumping into something inside of me, and it's really not that big a deal. And if I can ask myself, is this really worth being this angry about? It never is. But once again, we think it's about the circumstance and why we overreact, and usually it's out of fear. We're afraid of something that's going to happen. And so, and also magnifiers are really bad about self-condemnation, about shame. And so you can do a simple mistake like forget to pay a bill or something. And, oh no, my credit's going to be ruined for life. I'm never going to be able to get the next mortgage, right? It's that kind of mentality of, just worst case, thinking the worst case is going to happen, instead of I've learned to say, oh, well, when something happens, you say, oh, well, because that's not what I want to say. Oh, crap. Instead, I just say, oh, well. So just really trying to take the thought captive. Once again, if I know when I start getting really angry or overreacting, then it's more about me than what's really happening.
And he's modeled this really well to the point now where I remember I was on a phone call and I was talking to Russ. He was out of town and I was telling him about something that really upset me. And he started agreeing with the person who had upset me because he was being compassionate about their situation. But in the moment, I really needed him to be compassionate about my situation. And I was so upset that he was even able to ask me in the moment, he goes, are you sure this isn't something more about you than what actually happened? Now, yes, the event triggered something, but my level of angst and irritation was exaggerated. And I was able to look at it and go, yeah, I've always, my biggest emotional wound is being triggered of being ignored. And that's what's happened in this situation.
And the point was, she was really, really angry. And so once again, she and I both know that when we're really, really angry, it's more about us than the person or the situation. And it was in a gentle, loving way. I said, if when we're this angry, when you're that angry, it's more about you than the situation. What's happening right now? And it was because it was bumping into that wound of being ignored, right? It's why she was so angry. It didn't mean that the person didn't do something hurtful,
right,
but it didn't deserve the intensity of the response.
Right.
That's the overreaction.
Thank you. Well said. Mm-hmm. So overgeneralizing. Overgeneralizing is a negative thinking pattern where we are one and done. The history repeats itself. So for example, if you have a fight with your neighbor, well, I guess we're just never going to be friends. Or let's say you were embarrassed as an athlete. Well, I guess I'm just not good at sports. Or I got a low grade on a test. Well, I must be stupid. And so when we overgeneralize, we don't give an opportunity for any other outcome because we are determined that that's it, where it's final. That's what an overgeneralizer typically does.
Great.
And then emotional reasoning.
And what could they do differently? I mean, what could they do to help?
That one was similar to taking the thought captive. taking the thought captive and focus on what's true. Okay, maybe I didn't do well on this test, but I have an opportunity to do better on the next test. Or I can do better on the next play in football. Or I could, work on my relationship with my neighbor. It doesn't mean that one event predicts the rest. You have a chance to renew your future with them.
And one other things that can help there is just always remember, whenever we have something negative happen or we're in a negative season in our life, we think it's going to be like that forever. Mm-hmm. And if we just remember that few things are forever. And so, we kind of do this overgeneralize, oh, it's always going to be this way. Just remember that few things are always a certain way, right? My spouse is never going to be able to change this thing. Well, we can all change over time. Just people need time to work through things.
Right.
So the next one's emotional reasoning. So emotional reasoning is where all of our decisions and the way we look at life is all based off our emotions, right? So truth to us is how we feel. It's all based off our feelings. And of course, this can get us really skewed in the way we look at life. And when we're always just doing things based off of our emotions and off our feelings. And one of the things that can help here is to get some wise counsel or get someone to help you, that can look at the situation logically and is not so emotionally involved, right? It's very hard. Emotional reasoners, are just so, they've probably been really hurt during their childhood. And they protect themselves based off their feelings, and their feelings are truth to them instead of logic being the truth. And so if you can find people that you can trust and that know that love you, and you can run things by situations and say, here's what happened, and I'm looking at it this way, or I feel about it this way. It's good that we can state our feelings, but there's a problem when we make all our decisions based off our feelings. Instead, if we can get someone out, once again, trust that person, that they can look at it. And if they say, hey, I can understand why you feel that way, but, on the outside looking in, I would, think that it might look this way. So, that's the best way to help. It's a really tough one because we've been emotional reasoners have been really wounded in why they base everything off their feelings.
Yeah. And one of the best things that you can do to protect yourself as an emotional reasoner is to not make a decision when you're so emotional about it. And like Russ said, have a friend, have your spouse, have a mentor, bounce the story off of them and get their perspective on it instead of making that decision in a vacuum.
And if it's something where you're really struggling with your spouse over, go to a counselor together, because a counselor is definitely going to look at it from a much more of a logic-based versus an emotional-based situation. And they don't have any biases one way or the other.
Right. So polarizing is another one that I have a tendency to resemble. Polarizers see everything black and white, good or bad. It's a perfectionist type of thinking. And what happens is, I am determined this is the way I see the situation. And there's no gray, there's no compromise. And I'll never forget our counselor told me one time when I was having this type of polarizing thinking, he says, you must be emotionally flooded. I'm like, I'm not flooded. I'm pretty clear it's black and white. He goes, if you can't see gray and you can't think of an alternative, you are flooded. And that really ticked me off. So now I've always caught myself, if I only see it as one way or another, I have to stop and know that I need to calm down until I can get more creative and come up with an alternative. So that's what helps me catch if I'm polarizing.
And it will help you see the other person's point of view, even though it may be different from yours.
Because in the moment, the more you attack, the more they're going to dig in. I'm telling you, I will dig in to make my point. Even if I can start to see your truth, I'm going to still dig in. So it's best when somebody can only see black and white is to just back off and wait to have the conversation another time.
Right. And then the last one's minimizing. So minimizing is the person that dismisses things. So when a spouse brings something up, they'll say something like, well, you shouldn't worry about that. That's not a big deal. And so first of all, they're not good at expressing their own feelings. And so they don't like it when their spouse expresses their feelings either. And this can be a real challenge in a marriage because it makes the other spouse feel that their feelings don't matter, which then creates loneliness and distance and rejection. And so while the minimizer thinks they're doing something good by not, making a big deal out of anything, they're actually making the person feel like that they don't count. Their opinions don't count. Their feelings don't count.
Yeah, their feelings are dismissed. Let's put on a happy face and everything's fine. Everything's fine, right? Keep it at the surface.
Yeah, and this is another tough one. I mean, what minimizers have to learn to do is to express their feelings, right? And understand that their spouse's feelings and opinions are important. And if they express some kind of concern about something, that those feelings are valid, whether the minimizer thinks they're valid or not, they're valid to their spouse. And so they need to respect those feelings, even in opinions, and concerns, even if they don't think that they're real. So if you can start looking at that, hey, while I may not think it's important, my spouse is important to me, and so it's important to her or him, then their opinions and their concerns should be important as well.
We had a minimizer in our small group, and a self-proclaimed minimizer, and he said, what, there's more than 3 emotions, happy, sad, and mad? Like, what else is there? And so his poor wife, who was a personalizer, she's like, do not dismiss my feelings. So that gives you a good overview of the 6 negative thinking patterns. And
and once again, here's the book, Intimate Encounters, and really encourage you to get this by David and Teresa Ferguson. Take the test. There's plenty of information there about each of the thinking patterns, and how examples of them, how to work through them, how to take the thoughts captive. So it's a fantastic book, and there's plenty of other great things in here as well.
It's a great workbook to do together. If your spouse is not interested in doing a small group with other people, it's a great workbook for the both of you to work together. And there's a lot of homework, so you can take it slow. You could probably break this up into 12 months and just work on it once a month together. We'll create a lot of good conversation. Yeah,
that's wonderful. We were so blessed to go through this when we were engaged, actually, right before we got married. Wow, it really helped us a great deal.
Yeah. So I'm going to go over the offer that I told you about in the beginning real quick. And it is our weekly webinar that we go about 5 to 10 minutes once a week. And what we try to do is share all the mistakes that we've made and the lessons we've learned to help you get there further faster. And we want to help you argue less, lessen your frustration, and get back to the flirtation and feel even more connected with your spouse. So this special will last until June 30th. It's $10 a month. You can cancel anytime. We're going to be closing the doors June 30th, and then come January, we're going to be increasing that rate to $18 a month. So this is a really good special, so jump on it while you can. And we will have a replay of this webinar for the next 72 hours if you don't do it today, or if you want to share this with some other couples or friends that you think might be interested. And going back to our chat room, we'll see if we have any posted questions. And we don't at this time, but I'm going to read off some questions that we did receive. And here's one that we were just talking about for the minimizer. This is a wife who says, I'm having dinner with my husband, and I try to bring up a sensitive topic for me, and he just brushes it off and tells me I shouldn't worry about it. And it does it in a disgusted tone. So what should I do? This is for the minimizer.
Yeah, and so I think for the spouse that this happened to, the wife should, we call it a soften startup. Go to their husband, not in that moment, but wait till she calms down a little bit, and then go to the husband and say, hey, there's something I need to talk to you about that's frustrating me. Is now a good time to do it? I want to make sure it's a time where you're in a good place. We call it a safe place, but you may not have that terminology, but meaning emotionally safe. Is this a time where something that's important to me that I need your help with and need to talk to you about? So that's what we call a soften startup, and then kind of express, hey, I know you don't mean to do this, but when I brought this up and you kind of dismissed it, it hurt my feelings. You don't like my opinions, my concerns, my fears don't matter to you. And I know they do, but it makes me feel that way when you dismiss them. So you kind of explain how you're feeling, but first ask for a safe place to talk about it, meaning, please be patient with me as I walk through this with you.
Yeah, very good. So here's one regarding a personalizer. So this wife says, I read into micro expressions and personalize it. How can I stop? Well, coming from a personalizer myself, one of the things that you can do is to be vulnerable. And this is really, really hard because no one wants to admit they're a personalizer and take everything personally. But one of the best things I've done is I've been vulnerable with Russ. I've shared this. And yes, he has been frustrated, but the more he's understood this filter that I don't want to be a personalizer. And now that he gets that, he has more compassion for my situation, because before he would be like, no, they didn't do that, they're not ignoring you. And I'm like, yes they are. And so what he does now is he listens to my story, acknowledges it, and sees it through my lens. But then what I love is he gives me an alternative. Maybe she had a long day at work. Did you see her husband elbow her and she didn't want to be elbowed? Or, he just gives me all these different scenarios, and just to show me my story is not always right that I make up in my head. And that's where the personalizer can make themselves a little bit crazy, is we come up with this story, we're convinced it's the right thing that happened. And so again, be vulnerable, share what you're thinking, and then ask for an alternative story to what you've made up. That's been the best way that's helped me. And then the last question I have here is, my husband blows up over everything. If I even brought this up to him, he would yell even louder. What do I do?
Yeah, this is kind of like the minimizer, just on the opposite side. But you've got to wait till the person calms down, first of all. And then go to them and say, hey, there's something I need to talk to you about that's very hard. I need your help with this. It would mean a lot to me if you could be calm and work with me on coming up with a solution to this together. And then let them know, hey, when you blow up at me, it really hurts me, it scares me. I know you don't mean to do it. I know you don't want to scare me. You don't want to hurt me. But it does. Can we talk this through on how can I help you keep from this, or in this situation, what can we do? So once again, it's all about love and respect and coming up with a common solution together versus attacking and lashing out and getting defensive. And when one person, like if you do this and they get defensive, then you might want to shut it down and come back to it. But you can't, you can't let their behavior generate yours. So if they get defensive, don't get defensive back. It just escalates it.
Yeah, one of the best things I ever learned is when Russ would say, okay, we're never going to do that again. I would jump in and try to argue like, no, we can't not completely not do that again. And what I've learned is I just needed to just not respond. Mm-hmm. And that took some strength for me not to say something in the moment. But I would see a day later, he's like, no, we'll do this and that. And I'm like, oh, I thought yesterday when you said never, I thought never meant never. And he's like, no, that's just in the moment.
Never means never.
No. Yeah, but it took some time for me to.
Yeah, because a magnifier, when they get flooded, they overreact. But when they calm down and they go back from their emotional brain back to the logical brain, then all of a sudden it's like, well, of course we'll do that again. But in the moment when they're flooded, all they can think of is never, 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 or always, always, always. So as Danielle says, she does a great job now. She just doesn't listen to me. And then she knows as soon as I calm down, I'm going to look at it completely differently.
Yeah. So hopefully that'll help you in not getting triggered by if you're married to a magnifier. Hopefully a softened startup, if you're married to a minimizer, will help you. If you're a personalizer like me, call me. You're one of my people. Take those thoughts captive and focus on what's true. It's great advice in the Bible. And
these are some of the topics that we go into detail in other webinars, like softened startup, like flooding. Mm-hmm. Those are things that we do in some of our other months that when we go through things that will help you. So please join us.
Yeah. So we hope this has been helpful. Thank you for joining, and feel free to share this webinar with your friends. And we hope to see you next week.
Thank you again for joining us.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.